Hello, welcome back to this installment of David Galata, Book Dreamer, here on YouTube. I am the author of Crew of Ganges, which is the first book of the Crucible Spirals trilogy, which continues with Veil of Strife and Painful Medicine as the conclusion. All of those are now available on Amazon or through myself directly in both ebook and print format. So today, here as I sit with the stars behind me, what am I going to talk about today? I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the history behind Crew of Ganges and for the ship Ganges. I want to make sure that I just give a little background history. There's a lot that's said in the books and not said in the books that, you know, videos like this are really good at getting forward. So I want to talk about a couple of bits of history. One of them is something that you'll find when you read Crew of Ganges. A lot of the crew talk about the awakening. The awakening, and it's all capitalized and all that, was an official time period in very early Ganges history. And it was at the third planet that they were terraforming. Before that time, the first couple of planets that they terraformed, the sectors were deeply divided in accordance with the 8 nations of the Terran conglomerate and the AI solidarity. So basically, Earth had been chunked up into 8 large nations. And when Ganges launched, they weren't the nations we have today. They were very, very different. The Terran conglomerate helped to fund Ganges, although the ship itself was considered an AI project. So it was actually the AIs that began the idea of seeding other worlds, terraforming other planets outside the solar system in the hopes that future colonists could get there and build their own societies. The Terran conglomerate didn't want to be left out. So they helped fund it, and they also did just a wee bit of sabotage there. So when the ship first launched, every sector was in the hands of a different nation from the Terran conglomerate. That doesn't sound particularly stable. Naga was considered the general manager of the mission as the AI, and technology sector was under the protection of the AI solidarity. Oh, politics. There was an officers' mutiny at Planet 3, and they wanted to turn the ship back to Sol and just say, we've had enough. We've had enough being out here alone in the dark. Messages between Earth, they call Terra, and Ganges, it was getting longer and longer for messages to be sent, even with the main transmitter, which worked along different lines in radio. It was still becoming more difficult to keep in contact with home. Even though these people at this point had basically been born and raised in the ship for generations, there was always this over political organization within each sector that was trying to keep their cultures pure in accordance with the Terran conglomerate. However, this officers' mutiny did not go over well with the general crew. The general crew basically saw, especially in aggro, aggro had basically been beaten into the dirt, literally, pun intended. They were hurting. They were not in a good place. And the ones who ruled over aggro sector were brutal dictators. So the general population did not want to go back to the masters of their officers. No. Anything but that. And so they ended up siding with Naga. This is a major simplification. I do plan on writing the trilogy of The Awakening, Uh, that's going to come in the future, though. I'm working on the second trilogy for Ganges now, and that's called the Invasion Spirals. That'll be fun. We'll talk about that later on, too. But the Terran conglomerate didn't want them to come back, but these officers really did. There were certain figures who were very important. Samuel Bergstrom, for example, and what was then called the Family Project. They were very important, even at that time, not because of their rank, but because of their connections. And so there was this mutiny within a mutiny, where the officers wanted to leave and, say, no more of this crazy mission, but the crew were like, we're not going back to where you want to be. The crew did win, though it was a narrow thing with a lot of bloodshed, and it was followed by a lot of change. The whole structure of the sectors had to be reinvented. Ganges had a launch charter, and that was the rules by which each of the sectors would abide for the sake of the mission and for the sake of the safety of all aboard the ship. That launch charter was amended many, many times, added to many, many times, and basically regulated into a corner by the time they got to Planet 3. So there had to be a new structure, not just for command, but for everyone. And they finished Planet 3, though it was delayed. They still sent the signal back. Yeah, they said there was a problem. And then they moved on. As they moved on, their freedom from the political structure of the Terran conglomerate became very obvious and very open. It was a very uplifting time. And by the time they finished their 9th planet, they were artisans now. They knew what they were doing. They began to become more creative with, say, molding continents or building mountains and things like that. They became artisanal. So that period of time from when the mutiny ends until about Planet 9, so between 3 and 9, is called the Awakening. And that was when everyone aboard decided that they were crew. Didn't matter what your rank was, didn't matter where you came from. Those are all things in the past. But are you crew? That was the important part. Are you crew? That ended up becoming what they call the Age of Unity, which lasted for thousands of years, although they would call them spirals. Haven't gotten to that time-telling thing yet. We'll get there. The Age of Unity was a very long and peaceful time where Ganges continued to gain experience over the generations with rebuilding worlds. By the time you get to Crew of Ganges, they are masters at the art of terraforming. And they know it. They know it. No one is more experienced than they are. Their crew have procedures that have been passed down for generations, improved upon, made more efficient, more artistic, and so on. So that was a very, very big part of the background of the book, is that Age of Unity is now coming to an end. And thus we have the Crucible Spirals. That's why the trilogy is called that. Now, they had to make a new charter in order to usher in this Age of Unity. And that charter is actually found in the second book, Veil of Strife. I actually wrote it out for me, for my fingers. And that is in the appendices at the back of the book with the glossary. All my books come with a glossary, except for my fantasy work, because then you're on your own. My fantasy is very much in the deep end. We will be talking about that in the future as well, my fantasy books. I've got one out there named Clockmaker, and I have another one I'm working on right now. It's in editing mode, which I know most authors don't look forward to, but it means I actually finished the thing, called Favored Son, and that will be coming out probably by the end of this year. Very, very much looking forward to seeing that out. So I do fantasy, but it's very off the wall kind of stuff. But with the science fiction, I do include a glossary because there are several terms that the crew of Ganges use that we don't use. And there are also some terms that they use that we use, but maybe not in the same way. They might, for example, they might say that they need gel, and you might think, okay, is that a shampoo? Is that a... No, what they're actually talking about is they need something that gives them some comfort, some relief. And that's because medical sector uses gel baths for their regeneration tanks. We wouldn't know that. We would just think gel. Okay, I know what a gel is, but what kind of gel are you talking about? For them, it's become a slang term. So things like that, yeah, you need a glossary. And I do differentiate. I tell you, this is a Terran term. So you know, okay, this word came from our language or one of the languages of this world, but now has a slightly different meaning. And this is what it means in Ganges, because everything changes. Everything changes. Now with the history, there's also a book that I've written called Tales from the Age of Unity, and it is a precursor to Crew of Ganges. I wrote it after the trilogy, and it's a collection of short stories that come from the Age of Unity, all the way back to just 1,000 or so years from the beginning of the Age of Unity. So if you want to check that out, it's just a small book that's also available now. And Tales from the Age of Unity talks a little bit of history. However, just to warn you, there are a couple of little spoilers there. And there's also a few Easter eggs that you might not understand if you haven't picked up the first book. Just to warn you. However, I was told that a couple of people who have not read the trilogy read those short stories and liked them all on their own. So apparently it's still a very enjoyable read. So if you'd like to do that, by all means, go right ahead. And then you're going to find Easter eggs in Crew of Ganges when you read that. So however you want to do it, that's whatever suits you best. That works for me. All right, I'm going to end this here. I've got a lot on my plate today. It's been a real banner week. Just want to thank everyone who has helped support Galata Studios and myself as an author. Things are going well, and I'm really, really excited. On May 21st, I'm having my first book signing. Yes, yes, indeed. And that is going to be in Effort, Pennsylvania, at the Morgan Rake Coffee Roasters. I'm going to be right outside there. Morgan was very, very gracious in allowing me to have some space to have my first book signing. So hope to see you all there. All right, folks, you have a great day, or as people of Ganges would say, have a great rotation. And I will see you next week. In the meantime, hope everything goes well for you. Take care.